Football Outsiders, with their DVOA projections and stuff, they have a mean projection of this team of 8.2 wins. So they're thinking this team could be just a little bit under 500. They have them as a playoff contender, which again is a metric that they use for odds to have 9 to 11 wins, which they think at that point is going to be a playoff contender at 33.5% of the time, and they have them winning the Super Bowl 1.5% of the time. ESPN says this roster is the 26th best in the league. If we look, another thing going against this team, though, and this is obviously the division is tough, but the schedule in itself, third toughest schedule heading into 2021. And when you have a really tough schedule and you have a bad defense as well, things can go really south here. So at Sharp Football, they have the projection down at 7 wins and last in the AFC West for this Raiders team. Pro Football Focus has them power ranked 21st heading into the year, and they actually have them. So this is one thing that PFF does, and again, this is different from, because this isn't a subjective type thing from them. They run a simulation 10,000 times, and then they just take what the averages of those 10,000 simulations. Well, of that, 9.2 wins for the Raiders, actually, according to Pro Football Focus's simulations. I think that's on the high end. That's probably a ceiling type outcome for this Raiders team, but not out of the realm of possibility. The offensive line is going to be a work in progress. Listen, we mentioned Alex Leatherwood. They took in the first round. He is going to have to step in and start. We know that for sure. Colton Miller, Richie Incognito, they have a chance to be a nice little core of this unit. The problem is Incognito only played 74 snaps last year due to injury, and he's actually been injury prone over the last 3 seasons as well. So while he has been good while he's been on the field, Incognito has not been on the field very often. So we're going to need to see if he can stay healthy with all of that. Like Leatherwood, just an absolute beast of a run blocker, maybe a little bit of pass blocking work to do. Miller is actually just the opposite. Colton Miller is super highly graded pass blocker, but his run blocking is really, really subpar. So if these guys can kind of balance things out a little bit, then again, you have at least a decent little core for this offensive line. The problem is just the other 2 spots. Denzel Good, who's going to slot in at right guard, finished graded 59th out of 84 qualifiers last year. They don't know who's going to play center for them right now. 3 different guys going to be going after that position, all 3 of which are kind of subpar as well. So it's going to be a patchwork offensive line, going to be a work in progress, probably, most likely, when it comes to things.
I don't want to gloss over the draft thing, because your point is well taken. Alex Leatherwood ought to be a really good offensive lineman, was fabulous at Alabama, ought to be a really good offensive lineman. But part of the problem with this franchise, because even though Alex Leatherwood will be good, the fact that they chronically overdraft.
Right. And the thing is, would he have been around for their pick in the second round? Maybe
not. But the point is that they get so enamored with certain guys, and it's not just Alex Leatherwood at 17 this year. 3 years ago, it was Cleveland Farrell who was drafted 4th. Cleveland Farrell has his moments, but nobody thought he'd be drafted 4th.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the year in between, and I want to get the number picks right. Henry Ruggs was drafted 12th, the first of a class group of wide receivers. I think we all agree he's not even close to being the best of that bunch.
No.
And then the one that was
probably the worst of the bunch. Actually.
Right, probably the worst of the bunch. The one that was the most egregious, based on where guys were projected, they drafted Damon Arnett at 19 in that same draft 2 years ago. So I guess all I'm saying is this: when you keep doing that, you end up with fewer good bodies to choose from. It just becomes a numbers game at that point. So that's the biggest flaw with this franchise. They chronically overdraft. John Gruden now going into the 4th year of his 10-year, $100 million deal. Is he on the hot seat?
If they finish last in this division, I think there will be some discussions.
Yes, I would think so. On the bright side, and you brought up, we're showing on this screen the Raiders receiving stats from last year. Darren Waller, if it's not Travis Kelce, we're going with Kelce. If it's not Travis Kelce, if it's not George Kittle, it's Darren Waller as being one of the great tight ends in the National Football League. I can't tell you how many Raiders games I watch, and when they're on the offensive side of the ball, when their offense is on the field, I'm like, just go to Waller.
Yeah.
He is uncoverable. So they do have that going for them.
Yeah, and he's versatile as well, right? So they line him up on the outside as well. Like they line him up in the wide receiver position, and he is so good at route running, and he's actually fast enough as well that he wins when they line him up outside as well. I mean, if you look at these skill position players right now, so let's just take a step back. And yeah, it's not going to like completely blow you off the page, but just let's imagine a rosy scenario for this. So you do have Derek Carr, who's coming off a pretty good season, actually kind of an under the radar, pretty good season. 27 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He took more chances. That was one of the things we alluded to a little bit earlier in the show. So 6.3 air yards per pass in 2020 was the second lowest in the league. Last season, upped it to 8.2 air yards per pass, which was actually 17th, which, listen, I understand that's still not even in the upper half, but when you are second to last, you are making progression here. You are trying to take more chances. You're trying to put the ball downfield a little bit more. He does need to work on his fumbles, though. He had 11 last year, was tied for the league lead in fumbles, which is not one of the things you want to be tied for the league lead in, and so he needs to protect the football a little bit better. But the core around him, Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, Henry Ruggs, John Brown, Brian Edwards, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, these are all dudes, again, if a healthy John Brown can play in the NFL. He's proven it. He's a good player. Henry Ruggs, we have seen wide receivers. Now, we got spoiled last year with this just epic class that we've got. We've seen wide receivers struggle in year one and then come back in year two and actually make something of themselves, right? Like they really did need that year to figure out how to separate from NFL corners and things like that, because it's just a different animal, right? Like some of these guys that dominate in college, you're going up against corners that are never going to sniff the NFL, and then every single corner you go up against in the NFL is the very best corner you would have gone up against in college, and it takes them a little while to clean up the routes and understand how to get open. And so maybe that's Ruggs. And so if he takes a step forward here, we know what you get in Jacobs for sure. Kenyon Drake now gives them a pass-catching option at running back, which Josh Jacobs not at all. And so he's pretty versatile as well. Hunter Renfrow, actually a pretty good slot guy. I mean, like it kind of is what he is. There's no real upside with him, but he is what he is. Pretty good slot guy for them. And so there are pieces there. And as you mentioned, I mean, of course, the Darren Waller. And I think everybody would easily consider him at worst the third best tight end in the league, as you said, behind Kelce and Kittle. He was actually graded higher than Kittle this past season, so he was only behind Kelce as far as ratings go. So I think that he's definitely in that conversation for top two-ish type deal. This offense actually ranked 8th in the league in EPA per play last season as well. And so, I mean, the offense wasn't really the problem. The problem was just the defense. And